All right. Welcome everyone. Good morning and welcome everyone to this next international trade session focusing on opportunities in Asia and Oceania. Today, I will be hosting the webinar. My name is Giulia Bonanni. I'm one of the International Trade and Customs Advisors at the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce. I will be running the webinar together with Sarath Menon, who's our partner for Southeast Asia, and Angela Foley, who's our partner for Australia. So the agenda will be as follows. So there will be just a short introduction about the chamber. I will then pass it on to Sarah to talk about opportunities in Southeast Asia, and then to Angela to talk about Australia and Oceania. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and then closing remarks. So to start with a brief introduction about the chamber. Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce is a membership organization. We are actually one of the oldest chambers. We were founded in 1794 and we celebrated 230 years this year. We cover 10 local authorities, including Bolton, Bury, Trafford, Oldham, and so on. And we have around 4,200 members from all sectors and all size. We have, among our members, we have around 3,000 exporters and importers, which trade globally and seek our support for export, import, or to invest overseas. We won loads of awards. We were selected as Chamber of the Year, Excellence in International Services and Campaign of the Year. We're very active on our social media, so we always try to support our members on all the platforms and try to promote their activities and services on our newsletter. And we organize loads of events every year, specifically international trade events, but also networking events in the various local authorities that we cover. We have a massive network made up of different chambers, but also partnerships with private companies, which operate in more than 90 markets across the globe. In terms of international services that we can provide, we have market awareness, research and entry services. So in case your company wants to expand to a certain market, we have partners like the ones that we have today at the webinar, which can assist you in finding distributors, agents, and get help overseas. We also run international trade events like this one, but also trade forums. The next one is going to be on the 10th of December. And we organize plenty of courses, training courses on import, export, and specific to different topics like tariff, Incoterms, and so on. We also provide bespoke advice and customs compliance services, just to make sure that your company is compliant to HMRC guidelines. We also provide getting paid services such as credit checks, foreign exchange services, letters of credits, and we provide export documentation, certificate of origin, UR1, ATA carnets, apostilles, notarization, and so much more. And we are a customs broker, so we do provide import and export clearances, IPAV services, T1s, GMRs, and so on. So if you need any support, you can reach out or just visit our website, which you can find at the bottom of this page. So these are the next events that are gonna be the next session of the International Trade Week, as well as some training courses that we will be running till the end of the year. And I will now pass it on to Sarath Menon, who's our partner for Southeast Asia, as I already mentioned, and Director of Orisa International. To you, Sarath.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I want to thank the Chamber for inviting me to speak today to all of you about the market opportunities in Southeast Asia. And I also am pleased that I'm sharing the stage with my good friend, Angela Foley, who will be talking about the Australian market. Let me just see if I can get this moving. The slides. Okay. Just sorry, I think there's a bit, okay, sorry, there was a bit of a lag today. In my presentation, what I'm going to be doing will be, I'll cover a little bit about what's going on in terms of economic growth in our region and in the individual countries. Talk about some of the potential opportunities that might be of interest to your companies, and just conclude with some remarks about doing business in the region and some of the things that you should be thinking about. And after the presentation, as Julius mentioned, I'm happy to address any questions you might have. So let me just kick it off by perhaps doing a little bit of a quick introduction about who we are as a company. Basically, we're an international business development consultancy firm covering the Southeast Asia region. We are based in we're headquartered in Singapore, but we have offices as well in Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. And basically, what we do is we provide a range of market entry and market expansion services. So what do we mean by that? In essence, our services fall within what we call three buckets. One is helping companies understand the market. So we do a lot of customized market research. That could be about helping companies put together a go-to-market strategy, getting regulatory information, competitor scan, and so forth. Or, and in essence, information that they can use to then make a determination as to how they want to do business, routes to market, and so forth. The second core service is what we call, what we would describe as helping companies enter the market. So a lot of it is focused on helping companies find distributors, resellers, local partners, and then providing the business matching services. And then we have a third service which we describe as helping companies grow their business in the market. Right now, that's doing lead generation, or in some cases, even hiring staff for companies who don't want to necessarily incorporate a company, but would like to have a full-time person on the ground dedicated to them. So we provide that service as well. We work with companies across multiple sectors, and we've been fortunate that these are some of the export agencies who we work with who refer clients to us. In the UK, we are, as Julius mentioned, one of their consultants for the Southeast Asia region. We're also working in a similar capacity for Invest Northern Ireland, and we're one of the delivery partners for the UK Tech Growth Program at least for the Southeast Asia region. So with that, let me just sort of start the discussion about what's going on in our region. And I think the first point I would make is that at least in terms of economic growth, we're not doing too badly. I think we anticipate we'll probably grow at around 4.5% this year, based on the growth rates we're seeing in individual countries. Some markets are growing a little slower than others. Singapore is probably expected to grow at about 2.5%. Similarly, in Thailand, Malaysia is looking to grow at about 4.5%. And then you have markets like Indonesia, which is expected to grow about 5% this year. And then you have Vietnam and the Philippines growing at about 6%. So those would be our two fastest growing markets in our region. And what do we expect going on next year? It's obviously a little challenging to say right now, especially given the results of the US election last week. I mean, do we think that there will be more investment coming into Southeast Asia as the tariffs against China's products increase? Possibly. Could there be a situation where Vietnam falls within the crosshairs of the new administration because of the significant trade deficit? Possibly. and there could also be a situation where there's a sort of a reshuffling of FDI investments in our region as a consequence of that. But I think whatever happens, I would say that we anticipate the growth next year to still be pretty robust. I think average will still fall somewhere between 4 to 5%. And I think we should still see pretty strong growth in countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And it's not just because you're looking at the growth in the middle income population, more spending, both in terms of public spending and private sector spending. But you're also seeing another factor in play here. As the competition among countries in Southeast Asia intensifies, we are seeing a lot of the spending in our region by certain countries to compete more effectively with markets like Vietnam, for example. So you're seeing in some countries more spending on building the digital infrastructure, more spending on building the physical infrastructure, getting companies to move up the value chain by adopting more leading edge technologies and so forth. So I think some of these factors will come in play as we see what goes on in next year and beyond. Another factor that's going on in our region is the fact that many countries are trying to find ways to help their companies get a piece of the action, so to speak. One reason is the imperative to diversify from China even faster than they might be doing now. And so that's why when you look at what's happening in our region, we are probably one of the most free trade agreement, FTA-wired regions in the world. I mean, we have free trade agreements as part of RCEP, CPTPP, obviously within the ASEAN free trade area and so forth, and then also with individual countries like the UK. And many of these free trade agreements basically are in place to lower tariffs and barriers for companies that want to do business in Southeast Asia. And these are just some of the countries that have agreements in place. It doesn't even include the ones that are trying to negotiate free trade agreements as we speak. So right now, the Canadians are trying to pursue some FTAs with one or more markets in our region on an individual basis. The EU is doing the same. And you would not believe this, even some of the Middle Eastern countries are trying to negotiate agreements as well. So, for example, the UAE is trying to negotiate an agreement with Indonesia. The Saudis are looking to establish an agreement with Thailand. And so it just continues. And these are just not your typical agreements related to goods. There's also digital trade agreements in place as well. The EU's negotiations cover that as well. I just wanted to quickly mention that the UK, of course, has trade agreements with our region. They've had an FTA with Singapore since 2021. There's also an agreement with Vietnam since 2022. And similarly, in the case of Singapore, the UK also has a UK-Singapore digital economy agreement that was signed in 2022 as well. And then I thought that before I talk about market opportunities, some quick information about UK ASEAN trade flows. So as you can see that Singapore is still the UK's largest trading partner, followed by Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and so forth. And then on the FDI side, the UK is the 9th largest source of FDI in our region. As you can see in the top three, you have US, Japan, and China. I'd like to point out that if you hear about the China plus one strategy, the fact is it's China itself that's pursuing the China plus one strategy. Right? So let me now sort of touch on some of the things that are going on in the individual countries. I'll just quickly go through this. So I'll start with, of course, the smallest country. I'm sorry, I don't, for some reason on my screen, the formatting is gone out, but hopefully you all will get a better copy of the presentation after this. So let me first touch on Singapore. Still a significant place to do business. In our manufacturing sector, you have the petrochemicals, pharmaceuticals, electronics, aerospace, and marine sectors. And then on the services side, you have financial, logistics, and increasingly digital services. In fact, our digital services economy now is about 70% of our national GDP. So it is growing quite significantly. We're still ranked, up there as one of the easiest places in the world to do business in, competitive tax rate and all that. But the Singapore government also recognizes the fact that this is an expensive place to do business in. Labor costs are clearly very high here. That is why you can see that Singapore is also looking at agreements, like, for example, the one we have right now with Singapore and Johor, which is the state nearest to us in Malaysia, the Singapore-Johor Special Economic Zone. The idea behind it is to jointly collaborate, perhaps having companies set up their RHQs or regional operations in Singapore, but then next door in Johor, where they can establish their manufacturing operations, where the labor rates are a lot more competitive. We also have, as you may have heard, a new prime minister in place, and some of his priorities now are sort of expanding the social security net, investing more into the national healthcare system because we have such a rapidly aging population, and of course, trying to still continue getting companies to move up the productivity ladder by getting themselves to digitize, getting themselves to be more energy efficient. So those are some of the things that are going on, at least in terms of Singapore. Next is Malaysia. The Malaysian economic numbers are ticking upwards. Their currencies also started to strengthen. Why is this happening? A lot of ongoing and investments in public mega infrastructure projects, a lot of investments in data centers going into Malaysia right now, higher tourism arrivals, definitely better commodity prices for palm oil and rubber. So a fair bit of domestic spending. That's one factor in place. But when I talk about Malaysia, I also encourage companies to start thinking and looking out for a particular region in Malaysia. This is the eastern state of Sarawak. Sarawak is actually in the island of Borneo. It's north of Kalimantan in Indonesia, where the plan is to move the new capital of Indonesia to that line. But Sarawak is just north of that. Sarawak is sort of like the kingmaker right now in Malaysian politics, and because of that, they are now getting a lot more, or they are keeping a lot more of their oil and gas revenues, and so some of those revenues are now being spent to grow the economy in Sarawak, improve the infrastructure, and use that to get more FDI into the states. And you're starting to see that happen. In fact, quite a bit of investment is going into the state in areas like, for example, data centers, as well as metal manufacturing and so forth. And one of the reasons for that is because aside from the gas deposits that Sarawak has, Sarawak also has a lot of hydropower. So it's quite an attractive location for companies in very energy-intensive industries. So a state in Malaysia to look out for. Indonesia has just elected their new president. He's just won a 5-year term. What are his priorities? Basically, he wants to look at food security, reduce dependence on countries in terms of food imports. He wants to make Indonesia a global food hub. He also has this ambitious plan to provide Indonesian children with at least one free nutritious meal every single day. So that is a big campaign promise he's made. He's also highlighted the importance of water security, defense security. So we anticipate probably more investments in that space as well. And he also wants to continue pushing companies that are in the mining sector to look at more downstream investments to boost the local economy as well. He's also mentioned in his recent speech the importance of education, the health sector. So he wants to leverage technology to accelerate the educational transformation, as well as in the need to reform the healthcare sector as well. Next, Thailand. Thailand's very industrialized economy, second largest economy in Southeast Asia. Some of you may know, key sectors: automotive, electronics, food manufacturing, chemicals, machinery, and the supporting industries around that. Thailand's economic growth has been a little sluggish in recent years. They've got a couple of challenges. I mean, first, there's low productivity growth. There's not much public and private sector investment into the country. They've been impacted by the global, to some extent, by a drop in exports, as they're quite dependent on what's going on in terms of the global economy. And Thai households do have a high level of debt, which limits their ability to spend. So there are some stimulus measures in place to boost growth, but we're sort of seeing how that will develop, and whether that might help boost their economy. So it's a bit of a wait and see on Thailand. Then we have Vietnam. I mean, you know, just just to give you a sense of how fast and how much Vietnam is growing. Last year, FDI into Vietnam was so significant. At one point, they were they were looking at, and they approved 700 FDI projects. That is in 2023. 700 is not a small number by any means. Right now, at the rate things are going, they're expecting FDI investment into Vietnam to be about 10% higher than what it was last year. So Vietnam is still growing very strong, and clearly one of the markets that a lot of companies are looking at for as they think about their market selection for the Southeast Asia region. And then finally, we conclude with the Philippines, which is under the radar for many companies, but the fact is, it is growing as fast as Vietnam. And some of the factors for this, there's a lot of investment into the country. They're of course also getting a lot of overseas remittances. There are many there are many Filipinos who work overseas. They send their money back. That is increasing as well. A lot of investment in infrastructure, in defense, in power, and so forth. So another market that we are seeing a lot of interest from companies as well right now. So I just wanted to sort of give you a quick overview of what's happening in our region. I'll now sort of quickly conclude by talking about two sectors in Southeast in our region, and this is firstly the ICT sector. Our internet economy is growing at about 40% per year, and if you look at some of the countries in our region, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines, there's still significant room for growth because the number of internet users is nowhere near 100%. And as this happens, there's a big push by many of these countries to look at digitization. So that opens up opportunities, whether it's in fintech, data analytics, cybersecurity, or other solutions. And that's on the software side. Let's not forget there's also opportunities on the hardware side, adding more broadband connectivity, especially in remote locations. And with that comes along, demand for online education, telehealth solutions, and all of that. But I would also add a little bit of a caveat in terms of what you need to think about as you look at this sector. And that is, what is your market entry strategy? We had a delegation of UK companies here in Singapore earlier this year, and as part of that mission, we arranged a meeting with IMDA, one of the agencies here in Singapore. And so as they were briefing the companies about the digital sector in the country, they made a remark that last year they saw or spoke to at least anywhere between 5 to 10,000 companies last year alone. So the point I'm trying to make is there is a lot of competition, not just from the standpoint of companies coming into the market, but also competition for companies who are looking for partners, whether those are system integrators, IT equipment sellers, and so forth. So it's something to think about as you plan your strategy as to how do you want to tackle that, because it's probably happening the same in other parts of Southeast Asia. Then I will talk about the manufacturing sector. So in this case, as I might have mentioned earlier, we talked about, you might first want to map which sector you're looking at. So if you're in the electronic sector, obviously all 6 countries would matter. If you're in oil and gas, petrochemicals, you're looking at Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. Mining, for sure, Indonesia, Vietnam would be important. Automotive, Thailand for sure, small clusters in Vietnam, Indonesia and Malaysia, and then industrial across all countries. So depending on what you are selling, there are not just potential targets within the existing manufacturers in our region, but as well as the new manufacturers who are establishing plants here in Southeast Asia. One thing to note in our region as well is that as you think about your market entry strategy, it's also important to note that are your ideal targets here in the sense that I'll give you an example. Sometimes we get requests from companies who say, oh, okay, I'm selling into the automotive sector. I think Thailand would be a great market to look at. But then I tell them that, look, in Thailand, a lot of the automotive sector companies, not just the OEMs, but the tier ones to some extent, are dominated by the Japanese. And if you're not able to sell to the Japanese, that might not be the right market for you. So some things to think about as you look at your strategy. All right. So I will sort of go through this slide and just finally sort of conclude that, look, there's a lot of interest in our region, and that's good. But that also means you need to also think about how do you want to enter the market. We get a lot of requests for companies looking to find partners, resellers, and all that. But the reality is that there's a lot of others doing the same. So as you think about your market entry strategy, think about, okay, what can we do to incentivize our business, incentivize partners to work with us? What do you want to invest in terms of marketing and promotion? And these are factors you might want to think about. Is it worth it? I think so. I think Southeast Asia is still going to continue to grow for several years to come, and I think it is a market worth investing in. And so with that, I sort of conclude my remarks. Basically, if you're looking at market research services, business matching services to find distributors or any other market expansion services, we'll be happy to help you. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. That was absolutely great. Very insightful.
No problem.
Thank you. So now I will pass it on to Angela Foley, who's a partner for Australia and Oceania in general, and she's the director of Foley.
Thank you very much, Julia. Good morning to everybody in Manchester. It's evening time here. It's dark, but we're coming into summertime, so it's still pretty warm, and major thunderstorms moving across the region this evening. As mentioned, my name's Angela Foley. What I'm going to do, I know that timing is tight. We cover Australia and New Zealand here in this region, but I'm going to focus on Australia being the larger market. I'm just going to talk very briefly about who we are, a little bit about what's happening in Australia, UK-Australian ties, and then I'll zone in on some particular sector as well and just talk about where we see opportunities. I know we have companies from different industry sectors participating in the webinar today. It may be I don't address a sector relevant to you, but I'm always happy to jump on a call or have a conversation with you down the track or separately if you want to do that just after the session today. So I guess in a nutshell, you may be able to tell from my accent, I'm not Australian, but I've lived here almost 30 years. I grew up in Ireland, spent about 7 or 8 years working in the UK, advising Australian companies on market entry into the UK, Ireland and mainland Europe, and also looking at UK companies who were investing in Australia. Then moved here in 95, set up the business in 2002. Very similar to Sarath, looking at his client base. We work with a lot of the same clients out of North America and Europe. We're the trade rep for Invest Northern Ireland here. Obviously, love being a partner for Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce. And at any day in our office, we're doing market research. We're developing roadmaps for market entry. We're looking to identify prospective partners for companies, whether that's importers, distributors, end customers, etc., doing competitor analysis, and then providing advice on possible setup as well. It's something we've been doing for a long time. By the nature of clients, we work right across all industry sectors. But I guess if we think about Australia, I'm sure many of you have visited Australia or New Zealand. You have family here, you're familiar with the market. I really just wanted to put this slide up to think from a distribution perspective, a supply chain perspective. And just to make the point that you can obviously see large country, small population relevant to the UK, but pending what industry you're involved in, pending who your customers are, what your entry model will be, it really is important to think about where you need to position those partners, or if you're setting up yourself where you need to be. So if you're in you can see the population spread predominantly up the East Coast and growing between, Adelaide really with Melbourne, Sydney and up to Brisbane in Queensland. So if you're doing, consumer products, etc., that's where the most population is going to be, your target group, etc. If you're looking to sell solutions or products or services that might be related to some key, say, public infrastructure projects, hospital builds, road infrastructure, etc., potentially a lot of that's going to be following the urban density and the population growth, again, along the East Coast. But it may be we've got people today participating who are in the oil and gas industry or in the mining industry. So then critical minerals, etc., processing, you may need to look at Western Australia, over in Perth, up in Darwin in the Northern Territory, where we've got some energy projects, and far north Queensland as well with LNG, mining and hydrogen clusters, etc. also. So the message there is really think about your market entry strategy, think about the market here and think about the partners and where your customers might be, and then build out the supply chain based on that. You saw our population. I always think that we are punching above our weight. If you add up our growth figures year on year from 2019 to 2024, it looks, very, very positive, but you got to think year on year what it is each year. And it's still been challenging in recent years here, with inflationary pressures, cost of living, etc. as well. But we have benefited from our region. Sarath just talked to you about the region around us. I mean, our outlook really reflects what's happening with the prosperity of some of the major trading partners in the region, be that India, China, ASEAN partners, etc. as well. Traditionally, if you think about Australia, going back, we're a resources country, we're a food country, we're an agricultural country, we're building up our other industries. Our exports are very important. We're an island nation, but to be able to export what we do, even in, the resources sector, the ag sector, we still need to import equipment, solutions, etc., to allow us to make that happen. And I guess thinking about that, then if you look at just simple statistics around the UK and the relationship when it comes to exports out of the UK, etc., my message is really, if you're not exporting, some of your neighbouring countries possibly are. There's always those large export numbers like cars or medicinal or pharmaceuticals, etc. But we work right across industry sectors. Sarath mentioned his company delivers a tech growth program from the UK. In his region, we deliver that same program here. We've worked with some fabulous companies out of the UK in the tech sector with solutions that have been, picked up really quickly here once we've mapped out, the local market, the opportunity, and the best partners and market entries opportunities as well. And then on top of that, if you think about the UK and Australia, and I know this going back to when I lived there in the late 80s and early 90s, the number of Australians who moved to the UK who stayed, the number of British citizens who've moved here, who've stayed, the close ties with Commonwealth, etc., English language, rule of law, all of that, it still means something for ease of doing business. In the non-technological age, distance was always a problem, but when you think about it now in the technological environment, it's so much easier to do business here, to service your clients, etc., because we all are connected from a technology perspective. And then on top of that, in the last year, we've just had the free trade agreements signed, you know, from the point of view of reduction of tariffs or 5% on most goods coming into the country, allowing ease of, you know, access. Say you're a professional engineering firm looking to come to Australia and look for some opportunities here around infrastructure or some of the big projects you have, it's easier now to make that happen and relocate staff, etc. Looking at standards, looking at data flow, cybersecurity, regulations and that type of thing, the free trade agreement all makes that easier. It's early days, but it definitely contributes. And then on top of that, I just wanted to reference AUKUS. We had an agreement, I guess, taking a step back with the French to build some submarines here. It didn't quite work out. Faults on both sides, cost blowouts, timelines, lack of communication, a whole variety of things. But ultimately that relationship was broken. We looked at other avenues. AUKUS is that trilateral security pact between the US, the UK and ourselves. And that's an evolving mechanism. We're learning more about AUKUS. I think I could do an actual webinar purely on AUKUS and what it's going to mean down the track. But if I was going to highlight a couple of points, number one, it's not just about submarine development. That is pillar one. That's where we're starting from, but it's also about the wider advanced technologies and the opportunities for collaboration and cooperation around that, particularly in areas like AI, quantum computing, hypersonics, cybersecurity, etc. as well. So we've had quite a few companies, both in delegations from the US, we've had companies from the UK come into town, and we all have the same discussion. What does it mean? When do we really see the opportunities coming through? We're beginning to see them come through. It's early days. You've got a change of, you know, the political situation in the US. We will have an election possibly before, I think, May 2025 here. There's always shifting sands. But ultimately what we're seeing that these opportunities, it's all about the geopolitics of the region. It's defense and military cooperation in the region. It's looking at the expertise that you have in a country like the UK, where you might already be working with, you know, you're in the supply chain, for example, into defense contracts in the UK when it comes to collaborating on contracts there, and how you might be able to take that to the Australian market and maybe just capitalize on that here to a degree as well. Again, more than happy to share additional information on that with you. It's something of interest to individual companies. And I just wanted to jump in then, being conscious of time. I'm going to highlight just a few sectors. And I'm just going to make a few points. We will share this information via the Chamber to you post the event. But a good way when you're looking at public infrastructure projects, you saw that earlier map with the population spread up the East Coast and growing, becoming more urbanized every day. So our infrastructure has to follow that. So a good way to actually see what's happening when it's coming to infrastructure is keep an eye on what's happening in the federal and the state government papers. Really see what's happening, where the spend is, look at the big projects and see then how you might be able to capitalize and capture some of that. I'm just going to mention one simply because I'm going to the annual conference in a couple of weeks in Queensland, the rail sector here. Got a national rail procurement strategy, which you can access. We're looking at, you know, whether it's rolling stock procurement. We're saying that we're going to manufacture over 65% here and maybe import about 35% when it comes to vehicles, rolling stock in general. I think it will be a higher import statistic. But also there's opportunities around, you know, rail civil construction, the maintenance opportunities as well. And then the next level, I've just come back from Europe and, you know, looking at train travel between London, Paris, Amsterdam, Paris, etc. We've talked, I see what's happening with HS2 in the UK and the plans. We've talked for years about the fact we need a high-speed train strategy. It's taken too long. In 2023, they finally set up a high-speed rail authority, and they're really now gathering the data, looking at what's happened overseas, the technologies being used, and how to actually package the opportunity when it comes to the delivery of these works. So something to consider down the track and something that's definitely going to present opportunity going forward, particularly for UK companies in the space, I think. We have a number of projects that are ongoing. There's hope that Western Sydney, our second international airport, will open in 2026 here in Australia. It's an ongoing, but I just wanted to reference Brisbane 2032, given your experience in London. Brisbane will host the Olympics in 2022. If I'm traveling up the east coast of Australia from the Gold Coast into Brisbane and up north to the Sunshine Coast, I'm already seeing new railway stations being built, road infrastructure really accelerated. But we've had a change of government in Queensland just a couple of weeks ago with our local election. They now have announced it's more of a Liberal rather than Labour government. Just looking at the spend around the Olympics and what needs to happen between now and 2028, really, because we can't wait to 2032 to have these venues in place and to have all the infrastructure, etc., in place as well. So something to think about. And just, again, you can look at the procurement strategy for the Games online on the Queensland Government website, but there's quite a strong Buy Australian, Buy Queensland approach. We don't have all the solutions. We need to partner with overseas companies. So it's a case of figuring out how you might access the supply chain. Clean tech, we've all got our net zero targets. Key point I wanted to mention, for whatever reason, maybe because of the size of the country, we've been too relaxed about it. We're one of the biggest waste producers in the world. And we've woken up to that fact. And we have to come up with solutions. And our local municipalities are particularly motivated to do that, and our large companies, our big resources companies, etc., our public companies who have to report annually on what they're doing. So the investment is really accelerated in waste management, recycling solutions, presenting opportunities here. And then if you look, we could look across multiple sectors, whether it's offshore, etc., but I'm just zoning in on hydrogen here as an example. So we're looking at how we can maximize the hydrogen opportunity here in Australia. But if you look at the infrastructure that's required, whether it's, medium scale compressors, electrolyzers, turbine generators, we don't manufacture a lot of that here. We have to look to other markets. And actually, I just came across a report, I think it was published in the last couple of weeks, commissioned by the UK government and produced by a company called Exodus. And it's available online. And it's looking at the Australian hydrogen market strategy and looking at the supply chain and where the opportunities are specifically for UK companies. You can find it online. If anyone has trouble finding it, feel free to reach out and I'll send you a copy. But very interesting reading. There are three other sectors I will reference, just looking at the time moving along. If we think about big picture with aerospace, I mean, the US is a key partner here. For most of our military jets, etc., we're looking at the US. We've had that relationship for a long time, but we also see the relationship with the UK with companies like BAE Systems, etc. But I really wanted to talk about drones. If you think about Australia, if you think about our maritime border, if you think about border protection, if you think about our large offshore oil and gas projects, if you look at our defence and security, our major public utility projects, we have a shortage of labour in this country across sectors. So any kinds of solutions that allow us to complete surveillance, capture data, conduct maintenance visits, etc., particularly in the wide open land that we have here, very attractive, whether it's to utilities, to large corporations, etc. And we've seen a number of international companies come in the drone space and look to capture that opportunity. Likewise, referencing space, although I will say, since I've sent these slides through to present, I just saw, and I haven't read the detail, we're getting a cut in some of our space activity budget. But ultimately, when COVID happened, we became very nervous in this country because we didn't have the medical equipment we required. We were worried about supply chain disruption. Things weren't coming in from China that we needed right across industry sectors. And we've known this could happen for years, but we just didn't do anything about it. So in the post-COVID environment, the government identified 6 priority sectors. Space is one of them, as is food, as is clean tech, as is medical devices, etc., medical equipment, where they're really looking to build up local capacity. But we're not going to do that overnight, and we're not going to do it. We need international partners and suppliers to do so. So if you look at space as an example, whether it's satellites, data analysis, communication systems, etc., again, we need to partner. And we've seen quite a bit of interest from the US. We've had quite a few delegations come in from the US. We've mapped out the sector here. So we think this is one of the ones that's going to be a growth sector going forward as well. Two other sectors I wanted to reference. Sarath talked about this from his region. I mean, tech flows across every industry sector. I referenced the fact we've got challenges around labour supply. We're a very big producer of agricultural produce, as an example. Any kind of tech solutions that are going to allow us to be smarter in our agricultural production, very attractive. Anytime I have an ag tech company visit this market, and the same in New Zealand, they often say to me, I could stay a second week or a third week and still meet with prospective customers, because we really have to look at how we can do things smarter and faster, and we're a known early adopter of new technologies. Same in cyber, the same as in the UK and around the world. We've all suffered our major security hacks. We're very vulnerable. Some of our major agencies, Australia Post, toll logistics, some of our big health insurance companies where patient data is being accessed, Medibank, etc. So the investment in cyber obviously is very important, going to continue to grow, and then right across through the fintech platforms, government agencies, etc. as well. With digital health, I'll reference that separately, but I guess the key point here is any tech companies, and hence working with the UK Tech Growth Programme has been very interesting for us here and very positive, because we see the results, we see the demand, and we see the UK as historically a trusted partner with quality solutions. And I guess finally then, before I just briefly reference market access, I just wanted to highlight health and medtech. I mentioned this has been highlighted. We got very nervous during COVID because we didn't quite know what was going to happen with the equipment we required for our hospitals. I'm not even sure if we were manufacturing ventilators in country. We may have had one small manufacturer, but for medical equipment and hospital supply in general, we realized we're so dependent on imports, and we still are to a degree. So you'll see over 80% of medical devices used in this country are imported, predominantly from the 3 countries listed. With the free trade agreement and the opportunity from the UK, there is room for growth from the UK. But you have to, and I guess, again, Sarath referenced this, you've got to kind of map out the market opportunity here, the customers, whether you're going to look at the public sector, the private sector, what that means from procurement opportunities, supply, whether there's tenders involved, and how you actually approach the market effectively. So whether it's to do with health infrastructure, if you want to look at opportunities around that, the easiest thing to do is look at the state budget papers, whether it's Queensland Health, Victoria Health, look at what they're predicting, look at the line items for budget spend, whether it's on new hospitals, whether it's on fit out of old hospitals, and what that might mean for you and for your fit into the chain. And then it's not just about, you know, that regular hospital infrastructure, beds, fit out, etc. as well. It also flows across to the digital side. Our private insurance companies, the same as in the UK, the same as NHS, the public hospital system, they don't want to see you in hospital for the long term. What they really want to do is they're motivated, whether it's insurance companies or government health departments, to look at solutions, but they must be clinically validated. We can't just say, I've got a wellness or a fitness watch and that's going to track my diabetes or whatever. They're very, very clear on they've got to be clinically validated solutions that allow people to stay in the home longer or leave hospital faster after operations. And likewise for our senior citizens and our aged care people, rather than having them in aged care facilities, to be able to live more independently in the home. And again, that was something, by the nature of our population spread, we all have the coast, very urbanized, but we also have populations living out in outback communities and smaller communities across South Australia, Western Australia, and the Northern Territory. So telehealth uptake was obviously very important in the COVID years, has continued, but also being able to monitor people remotely using these applications. So again, when we have health tech companies coming in, we see real traction here and we see success. So I guess to wrap up the health side, I just wanted to very briefly reference clinical trials. Australia is known for the quality of their trials, the flexibility, the speed they can be completed, which is why we see so many international companies coming in to actually conduct those trials here. But with any market, if we talk about market access considerations, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's health, etc., I guess where we spend a lot of our time, and you'll be familiar with this as individual exporters, looking at any market you want to approach, is just figuring out what's the best plan of attack. Is it looking directly at your customers? Is it actually the partnership model, finding a distributor? Can we help you with that? Is it looking at building up your in-country expertise by actually setting up a physical presence here in the region? How important is it to visit the market and actually meet with prospective partners and actually travel and actually meet and actually look at industry and identifying the pain points? So our message is really, it doesn't matter what the sector is. The example I have on screen is very specifically related to, health, life sciences, med tech, etc. You really need to map out who all the players are, whether it's government, whether it's regulatory, whether it's public systems, so there may be tender requirements pending the value of contracts, whether it's private systems, whether it's importers, distributors. You really need to just try and look at your sector, map out the players and say, okay, what's the plan of attack for me and my business to be able to access that market and come in and do some business. And then also, obviously, we encourage companies, if you are coming to the market, it's very insular here. If you think about any industry sector, if I go to find foods down in Melbourne, if I go to the rail show, wherever that is each year, if I go to medtech, I see the same players, I see the same companies, I pick up a lot of market intelligence. It's always worth my while attending. So if you are looking at traveling to the market, think about whether or not there might be a key event here that you can time your visit. If you're looking to qualify prospective partners, maybe even think about coming around the time of the key trade show for your industry sector. You can meet with prospective partners, you can meet with customers, but you can also walk through a show, meet with the wider industry, and really just identify what the challenges, the opportunities are, the pricing, and also see what your competitors are doing. So that was a very quick overview in the time. I really thank you all for taking the opportunity to listen and to participate. And thank you to Manchester Chamber as well for giving me the opportunity. And just to let you know that we're here, we're always available to have a one-on-one conversation and just talk about different sectors, different industry, likewise for New Zealand, and see where we might be able to add some value to you as you develop and build out your plans as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. That was very interesting. Great presentation as well. Right. We can start now with the Q&A session. There should be, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A section. While we wait for some questions, I actually would like to ask you something. So to Angela, so you mentioned in your presentation about public infrastructure. So do you think that UK companies can easily access Australian public infrastructure, or is it like a complex process? What's the best approach to it?
It can be complex, and I guess it depends on the size of the UK company and where you sit in the supply chain in the US. So it may well be that you're the equivalent of a John Holland or a Lend-Lease, or you may be a supplier into a John Holland company, for example, in the UK, and you can see they're actively working on projects here in Melbourne, or up in Brisbane with the Cross City Tunnel or something, and that allows you an entry point. I guess if you're a smaller company, what you have to think about is the resources required and whether or not there's going to be, for any part of a project, a bid requirement, or if simply you're going to be a supplier of a product or solution to somebody who's already a preferred bidder. So really working out where you fit in on the supply chain, because it can be quite complex and they can be longer term projects. And then, that goes cross industry sectors as well. If I look outside public infrastructure and just look into the hospital network, you can supply into the hospital network as an example, but pending the size of orders coming through, it may be that you actually have to bid to supply. So I sometimes say to companies, if you're coming in and you want to target the public hospital network, maybe don't start with Greater Sydney Health Network or New South Wales. Maybe start in a regional location like the Gold Coast Health System. Get a reference site, win some business, use that as a reference point to then be able to bid and look for those larger contracts as well.
I see. Thank you very much. And I have a question for Sarah as well. So obviously Australia might be a bit easier to tackle just because of language, but considering that there is actually a language barrier in Southeast Asia, would you reckon it's better for UK companies to find distributors, to find partners in Southeast Asia to try to enter those markets?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the route to market for many companies will have to be through local partners, distributors, because of procurement rules and all of that, language requirements and so forth. We do occasionally get the request whether we're able to help companies find a regional distributor, someone who can cover more than one market. Um, it can work in some sectors, but even then, we typically recommend to companies that um, you have to really evaluate what the capabilities of the regional distributor can deliver, and also how are they covering the market? If you have a regional distributor that actually has their own offices in multiple markets in the region, that's good. If it's a regional distributor who says I can cover the region, but in essence they're doing it through sub-distributors, uh, I would advise caution. One reason being that the margins for the distributor will get to a point where the product or service may not be competitive. So you got to worry about that. And then I would typically also tell companies that yes, you may not want to be working with multiple distributors, but on the flip side, you also are not putting all your eggs in one basket by working with one distributor as well. You're spreading the risk because one might be more active than the other. So that's typically what we suggest to companies.
And could I just
Absolutely.
maybe add to that as well, Julie? I was just going to say, because I spoke to a company from a different part of the UK today before this call, and we were talking about the market, and they were just about to appoint a distributor and ask them for a business plan, and they sent something very light. But also the UK company hadn't really thought about the fact. I said, number one, they've asked for exclusivity across 2 countries, but they're based in Perth. Do they have anybody on the eastern side or over in New Zealand? Number two, there's nothing in the agreement that you've started talking about milestones and an opt-out clause and deliverables, like a review of the contract. So that's really important if you do appoint a distributor, to make sure you have some kind of agreement. And it's not just about the deliverables from our perspective of the Australian partner, it's a two-way street. So what you have to do, whether it's support with collateral or trade shows or whatever it is, and then the Australian side as well. So everybody's kind of clear and there's no grounds for confusion about what the deliverables are and people aren't unhappy 12 months down the track. That's super important, I think.
Exactly, I agree with you. Thank you both. Thank you very much. I can see there are no further questions, so I will just like to inform everyone tomorrow we have another webinar. This one is gonna focus on Middle East. If one of my colleagues can please send, thank you. This is the link to register if you are curious about knowing more about opportunity in Middle East. We have again some experts tomorrow running a session from 10 a.m. And if you would like to leave us a feedback, we would appreciate that so we can improve and also know how you are approaching your international journey, if you're finding it difficult, if you need further support, and how the chamber can help. In the meantime, I would like to thank you, Angela and Sarah. It was a pleasure to have you today. Thank you for your presentations, for all the information that you gave us today. It was absolutely interesting, and there's a lot to learn. There are loads of opportunities for UK companies. So just hope that everyone that have been attended today found it useful. And again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to them both or just to the chamber, and we'll be putting you in touch with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I'll just wait for people to complete the poll. And here are also our contact details in case you need to get in touch with the chamber. This is our website where you can find all the future events. As mentioned, we have the Middle East webinar tomorrow, and then on Friday we'll be focusing on North and South America. North America will be running on the morning, and South America will be running in the afternoon. So I think it's a good opportunity to just find more and more about these countries. I'll just wait for more people to complete the feedback form. But in the meantime, I would like to thank also all the attendees for coming in today. The recording will be available on our website as well as the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.